Okay, so The Dark Knight Rises is slated to come out July 20th, which is going to be this upcoming Friday. A lot of people are taking it upon themselves to do different types of Batman retrospectives. Um, they review Batman Begins or The Dark Knight. Ziploc Gory's reviewing some of his favorite Batman stories, or like key Batman stories. Um, people are doing different things, which is fine. But I haven't really had a lot of time to do that, mostly having to do with the fact that I got myself an apartment. I actually got it Friday, or this past Friday, and I've been kind of moving into it, and haven't really had much of a time to be doing reviews on YouTube, and it'll be a little bit before I get the internet over at my new place. So I'm just kind of using the computer here at my mother's. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pick one of my favorite Batman stories, and I'm going to pick a Batman movie to review, which is not really touched upon, and I'll get along to that one shortly. Um, I've chosen to review Knightfall. Besides the fact that it's going to be a partial basis for The Dark Knight Rises, um, this is a very strong and still somehow underrated Batman story. Um, this is the story for Batman in the 90s, what Maximum Carnage was for Spider-Man, or the Age of Apocalypse was for the X-Men. They're not really great or outstanding stories, but they certainly had a lot of hype behind them, and this is one that had hype, which has kind of died down as the years have gone by, but it's still a powerful piece to read. The trilogy, which is primarily written by Chuck Dixon for the because the three volumes that I have are the ones that would just collect Batman and Detective Comics. DC's been putting out expanded versions of the Knightfall trilogy, which I will be picking up on down the road. But this is primarily my review of the Batman and the Detective Comics collections. This is really the first time that we've seen Bane burst onto the scene. I never read the original issue in which he was introduced from one of the Bat Family titles, but this pretty much establishes him sort of as Batman's Doomsday at the time. He's a very dangerous opponent who, over the course of the first half of the Knightfall story, and has actually studied Batman, who's just been pushing himself to the brink of exhaustion over the last, I'm going to say, a month or so. And Bane studies his opponent for weaknesses and determines what's the best way to move in and break him once he's been put through a gauntlet, which he's been arranging. And probably the biggest obstacle in Batman's path before Bane moves in to make it strike against him is his releasing a lot of the inmates from Arkham Asylum, and Bruce absolutely refuses to rest, and he's going out there and pushing himself past his limits, trying to round up as many of the inmates from Arkham as possible, and eventually Bane will move in and break his back, and that will pretty much be the end of Bruce Wayne for a majority of the second act and a lot of the third act of this trilogy. Um, it's a terrifically well-told story. Dixon does a hell of a job examining Batman and exactly finding out what his limits are. While stories like The Long Halloween, which are terrific and seems to be the only credit in a lot of people's eyes that Jeff Loeb gave to Batman, this is one that comes pretty close to that story. It's a truly epic event in which there were consequences, and while this isn't really inspired in any way by the Death of Superman story, which came a couple years before, this is kind of examining what the world would be like without Batman. And I think that the writer does a really good job with this. I also like some of the character stuff that they do when we examine how Gordon kind of reflects on what it's like without Batman. Bullock does that. And we examine Tim Drake when he's Robin at the time. And a lot of the stuff which is brought up later on when Azrael takes over the role of Batman for the remainder of the story. And I really like what they do with him, and especially his madness from all that brainwashing he went through with the Order of Saint Dumas, which was pretty cool. Um, the story is good, and then we transcend over into Knight's Quest, which is Azrael taking over the Batman mantle, and eventually he does manage to take out Bane, and then the third act of the story will be Batman trying to get over his injury at the hands of Bane and just try and bring himself back to what he was. I mean, this is sort of like the closest thing that you would see to him actually trying to figure out what his limits are. I mean, it definitely has a big impact because he went through the same injury that Barbara Gordon. Well, she doesn't have the use of her legs, and he came pretty close to losing the use of his legs himself. But it's still a very, very deep examination of that particular aspect of Batman, which I enjoyed. But things to nitpick with the story, though. Before Bane finally is taken out in the story, he gloats that taking out Batman is his one prerogative. And, he sits there and he studies him, and it builds up to the moment when he finally does break Batman's back, which is terrific writing. But then afterwards, his henchmen are sitting there saying, we need to go ahead and secure Gotham City, truly make sure that it belongs to you. And he's like, please, this is nothing. I've already beaten the Batman. What more do I need to do? And, besides him strong-arming a lot of the other mob bosses that are up under him, Bane just kind of sits around and does nothing. And he sits there and he just basks in the glory of his accomplishment, which it is kind of a letdown. Now, the story is still good, but that one particular aspect of it is a letdown, which I hate. And I also like a lot of the other things that this establishes, too. Particularly when Jean-Paul Valley Jean-Paul Valley, I started getting Azrael's real name confused with Phantom X's. But I like what this story establishes once Jean-Paul dons the Batman mantle, and the fact that we established that once Catwoman and the Joker run into this new Faust Batman, they're able to tell that he's not who he used to be. For example, when he actually runs into the Joker and throws down with him, the Joker's just like, "Oh my, you're not the same Batman at all, are you? Who are you? I mean, could you be a little bird?" Or something like that. And it kind of establishes that from this point on, the Joker always knows when he's fighting Batman and when he's not, which is pretty cool. The story also made me like two villains in particular so much more with the first time that I read this. The Scarecrow and Two-Face. And especially a lot of the fucked up stuff that Scarecrow does when he's given a lot of the limelight towards the end of the first act of this trilogy. Shows how dangerous he is. And then there's kind of that service that you're treated to if you read this for the first time and you wonder what would happen if the Joker was sprayed by Dr. Crane's fear toxin, and we pretty much established that has absolutely no effect on him. Which, in accordance with the checks and balances of certain powers or how certain things work against particular characters, it might be a little bit dumb, but it's still kind of funny to look at the same time. And the other thing that I enjoy with this is the stuff that they did with Two-Face in this, and that little mock trial that he makes up for Batman during the course of the story was really good. The art in here is good. It's totally good all the way throughout. And, this is, like, if there's any cheese in this story, the epitome of a lot of the exaggerations that they went through with superhero costumes in the 90s. One of the biggest ones of the 90s is shown with the constant upgrades that Azrael does to the Batman suit as he goes along. Like, I don't know what exactly it was with the brainwashing that was done to him to make him is the way he was, but besides the fact that he's already schizophrenic, he just starts wandering off in these little bouts, and he'll just black out and start drawing designs for the Batman costume, and he gets like the big gloves, and it starts looking like a giant robot suit or robot bat suit, which is, I mean, it's a little bit illogical, but with Batman, dealing with superpowered villains, this is kind of the thing you can suspend your disbelief with, and I have absolutely no problem with this. And I've pretty much rambled the story to death that I feel. Overall, the story is terrific. It's probably going to make a really good transition once The Dark Knight Rises comes out. And I absolutely have to recommend this to anybody who is a Batman fan and is curious about him. There's a lot of definitive Batman stories out there. The Long Halloween is at the top of the list, but this story definitely has to be in people's top 5 when it comes to examining Bruce in a really weak moment. So do yourselves a favor before you go see The Dark Knight, or after you go see it, go back and read the story. It is awesome. Highly recommended.